Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're fundamentally rethinking the way we work. We're breaking down some absolutely incredible insights from Happywise on a topic that honestly might seem a bit counterintuitive at first glance, the strategic value of pause. Our core premise here is simple, but man, is it powerful. Intentional stillness is not just taking a break from work, it's actually a vital neurobiological necessity for high performance. If you want to think clearly and perform at your absolute peak, you literally cannot afford to skip this.
Okay, let's dive into this with a brilliant quote from Cal Newport. He says, "In a world that never stops talking, the ability to be silent has become a form of competitive advantage." That just perfectly exposes the whole paradox of our modern attention economy. We are constantly surrounded by relentless activity, open-plan offices, back-to-back meetings, pinging instant messages. We've kind of trained ourselves to treat constant communication as productivity. But the reality is, this nonstop environment is actually destroying our ability to produce deep, meaningful thought.
The neuroscience behind why that happens is just fascinating. See, a lot of organizations operate on this outdated belief that a productive brain is one that's always actively responding to something. But cognitive neuroscience tells a completely different story. Say hello to the default mode network, or DMN. Think of it as your brain's background processor. As it turns out, some of our absolute most valuable cognitive functions, things like consolidating memories, finding weird connections between totally distant pieces of information, and generating those sudden aha insights, they only happen when the brain is not actively engaged in an external task. It fires up exactly in those moments of quiet.
So what actually happens when we don't give our brains that quiet time? Well, we end up with what researcher Gloria Mark calls attentional residue. It's basically the cognitive bandwidth that gets stuck on a previous task after you switch gears or get interrupted. In a highly fragmented work environment, this hidden damage just accumulates. Your brain never fully leaves that last email or that quick chat message, which significantly drains the quality of thinking you actually have available for your current task.
Let's look at the actual data on just how fragmented our days really are. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. On average, people are interrupted or they just switch tasks on their own every 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Just let that sink in for a moment.
Now compare that super frequent interruption rate with this downright severe recovery cost, 23 minutes. That is the actual time required to regain your full concentration after just one single interruption. Think about the math there. You're interrupted every 3 minutes, but it takes 23 minutes to fully recover. Which tragically, and quite mathematically, leads us to this result. Zero. Literally zero moments of deep concentration are ever reached in a typically fragmented working day. Actual performance increasingly diverges from perceived performance, and the crazy part is, most people aren't even aware it's happening to them. Let's see how this builds when we contrast these two different operating modes. On one hand, continuous stimulation leads straight to accumulated attentional residue, severe decision fatigue, where the quality of your choices just gets progressively worse as the day goes on, and a totally interrupted learning cycle. On the flip side, intentional quiet gives us the exact opposite. It hits the reset button on that residue, provides full cognitive recovery for those critical decisions, and actually lets you complete the learning cycle. Speaking of that learning cycle, it consists of 4 main steps: experience, reflection, conceptualization, and experimentation. Now, organizations that are constantly maximizing busyness are entirely skipping step 2. They just blow right past reflection. And the stark reality here is, if an organization skips reflection, it utterly fails to complete the learning cycle. Without carving out space for quiet, the organization simply does not and cannot truly learn.
And this brilliantly illustrates a concept Cal Newport calls pseudo-productivity. It's what happens when the sheer visibility of activity acts as a fake substitute for actual value creation. Maximizing busyness creates this really dangerous illusion. You end up with an environment that boasts extremely high perceived activity, everyone looks super busy, but incredibly low actual productivity when it comes to the complex strategic thinking that actually moves the needle.
So how do we actually fix this? How do we train ourselves and embed this concept of pause as basic mental hygiene? Well, Happywise outlines 4 crucial pillars required to systematically integrate stillness right into our routines. Plus being, plus us, plus discipline, and plus positive chemistry. Let's break these down one by one.
First up is plus being. This is all about stillness as a practice of self-knowledge. Honestly, silence can be deeply, deeply uncomfortable at first. Why? Well, because when the external stimuli finally stop, your brain starts producing its own thoughts, judgments, and unresolved questions. It brings up what truly worries us. The plus being pillar is all about developing the ability to inhabit that inner space with curiosity rather than just avoiding it. It's about facing those inner tensions head-on.
Next, we shift over to the plus us pillar. Now, silence is way too often treated as just a personal wellness goal, like it's strictly an individual responsibility. But let's be real, that perspective is unfair and ultimately pretty useless if your organizational environment demands perpetual 24/7 availability. A truly productive pause has to be built through shared norms. It has to be a cultural practice that is actively protected and valued by the entire organization.
The third pillar is plus discipline. Intentional stillness absolutely cannot just be this emergency pull valve that you only use when you feel completely overwhelmed and burnt out. It has to be a systematic, integrated practice. Discipline in this context means proactively designing your environment and your schedule so that silence naturally becomes the default choice at certain moments, rather than this incredibly difficult countercurrent choice that drains all your willpower.
Finally, we have plus positive chemistry. This highlights the fact that silence is actually a biologically active state. It's a literal biological regulator for your body. Implementing intentional silence produces real, measurable physiological effects. We are talking about activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which actively lowers your heart rate, reduces blood pressure, eases muscle tension, and increases your heart rate variability, which, by the way, is a massive indicator of both resilience and recovery.
So the crucial point is this: official corporate wellness policies mean absolutely nothing if leadership behavior directly contradicts them. Leaders dictate the true culture of silence. If a leader is firing off emails at 11 p.m. or expecting a 3-minute reply on a Sunday afternoon, or just scheduling back-to-back-to-back meetings all day, they are loudly communicating that constant availability is the actual expectation, regardless of what the handbook says.
The physical and digital design of our environments is also a hugely underestimated factor here. Think about open-plan workspaces. If they lack dedicated, protected quiet zones, and you combine that with communication tools that are basically set to maximum interruption mode, you create unavoidable structural noise. Individual coping practices simply cannot compensate for an environment that is quite literally designed to be loud and interruptive.
Ultimately, it all comes down to this absolutely vital takeaway. In silence, you do not lose time, you find the quality of thought. Protecting your silence means protecting the very source of your most hard-to-replicate value: your strategic decisions, your creative solutions, and your most profound insights. So I want to leave you with this question to reflect on. In today's frantic, always-on attention economy, what steps will you and your organization take tomorrow to start protecting your most precious competitive advantage?